What is good, everyone? Welcome to the Minds of the Ecclesia, and we will be getting started when Joe gets here. Should be 15, 20 minutes. He said he'd be a bit late. So let's see. We're looking at government shutdowns, recession news. Oh, wow. RFK suggests getting measles is better than getting a vaccine. I don't know if I'm shocked or not. Still a little bitter that my Gavin Newsom video got taken down. I'm going to be appealing that, but we'll see what happens. Wow. New push to change American school hours. I wonder what the impetus for that is. Let's see. Nope, it's just more stupid. I'm going to leave that alone. Let's see. Nope, nope, nope. Yeah, it's just more of the same nonsense so far. Let's see. Oh, Trump disowns the taking over the Gaza Strip remarks. Good stuff. Good stuff. More walkbacks. This is the most bipolar president I've ever experienced. Wow, they're saying Canada bent the knee? I don't believe this. Canadian Premier bends knee to U.S., apologizes to Americans after threatening energy price hike. Ontario Premier Doug Ford apologized to Americans Tuesday after he suspended a 25% electricity surcharge. This is after Trump called for state of emergency. Ford implemented a 25% surcharge on electricity to New York, Michigan, and Minnesota on Monday, but quickly rescinded the policy and apologized to Americans. Not to Trump, but to Americans. And to be clear, the Canadian Prime Minister has constantly posted that he doesn't want to do this to Americans. It's the administration. If Trump would just honor the trade agreement that he said was the best trade agreement of all time, we probably wouldn't be having an issue right now. Transmission towers that carry high voltage electricity are shown on March 8th in River Rouge, Michigan. Ford had a much more aggressive tone when he instituted the tariffs. We will not back down. We will be relentless. I apologize to the American people that President Trump decided to have an unprovoked attack on our country, on families, on jobs, and it's unacceptable, Ford said. Trump, in return, threatened to increase the steel and aluminum tariffs on Canada to 50%, with the increase going into effect the next day. Ford then talked with the Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, with the premier describing the call as productive. Once Ford backed down on his plan to implement the export fees, Trump reversed his planned hike to 50% on steel and aluminum tariffs. Ford is expected to meet with Lutnick on Thursday, so yep, this still isn't over yet. If a deal is not reached by the April 2nd deadline, the tariffs will resume. Ontario sold around 12 terawatt hours of electricity to America in 2023, with the U.S. being Ontario's largest industry customer outside of Canada. The tariff would have likely added $100 a month to the bill of Americans in the affected states, which in New York, I would not envy them. Crazy talk. Like, why do we have to be confrontational with our strongest trade allies? Like, literally messing with the two countries to our borders. I don't understand this. We can do better. Did my Twitch not start? Why did my Twitch not start? Let's try that again. There we go. Twitch started. I don't know why the Twitch didn't start. Admiral Gibbs, big announcement. Check me out Friday on Timcast with Prime Kai debating Doge. Oh, sounds like things are on and popping. All right. Twitch going hard in the paint. After Trump posts article saying shut up about egg prices, new data reveals how much egg costs just spiked. I'm just happy that the stock market is bouncing back at least a little bit. I feel bad for the people with 401ks for retirement watching their money go down the toilet because people want to have trade wars randomly. Tesla back up a little bit, Microsoft up ever so slightly, Amazon's bouncing back, my Nvidia stock doing better. Thank heavens for small favors. But yeah, we're seeing crazy shifts in the markets as our bipolar president keeps ebbing and flowing with whatever he wants to do. Apparently, he doesn't know a good trade deal when it bites him. But what can I say? And funny enough, Charlie Kirk, after that video that I posted earlier this week, showing in that debate that he was doing the Elon salute but underhanded. When he posted the video on his own server, he cut that portion out of the video entirely. So a more dishonest piece of garbage than I thought he was to begin with, but why would I be shocked? I mean, I wouldn't want to be doing that. Even the underhanded version. I don't know how we got to this point in America where we're now caping for oligarchs doing Nazi salutes. What else we got? Oh, this is a fun one. So apparently Girl Scout cookies are under attack. So let's see what that was. So Girl Scouts sued over alleged heavy metals and pesticides in cookies. The Scouts have been sued by consumers over the alleged presence, what's good, Moon? Of heavy metals and pesticides in popular Thin Mints and other cookies. A proposed class action was filed on Monday night in Brooklyn against the 113-year-old nonprofit and the cookies licensed producers, ABC Bakers and Ferrero USA Little Brownie Bakers. It cited a 2024 study commissioned by the GMO Science and Moms Across America, which tested samples of 25 cookies from the 3 U.S. states. The study said that the cookies contained at least 4 of 5 heavy metals, aluminum, arsenic, cadmium, lead, and mercury, that can harm people's health or the environment, often at levels exceeding regulators' recommended limits. And I'm going to say again, as I've said multiple times, there is no recommended level of lead. It also said samples contain glyphosate, a pesticide used in some weed killers, with Thin Mints containing the highest levels. Thank God I don't eat Thin Mints. I actually bought one box of tagalongs about a week or so ago. And now I'm like, damn it, more lead in my food. Like, apparently no chocolate is safe at this point. so I'm truly not shocked. Girl Scouts, short for Girl Scouts of the United States of America, addressed the study in a February 6th blog post. It said heavy metals occur naturally in soil, with trace amounts not a safety issue. The glyphosate was found nearly everywhere in the food chain. Girl Scouts said its bakers are committed to complying with food and safety standards. Oh, who was the second guest? Was it? I heard he's getting Steve Bannon in there, but did he have somebody that's not a complete horror show? Yeah, Steve Bannon. Straight up have Emperor Conan in there. Nah. Yeah, California is definitely cooked right now. I am not happy with the outcomes I'm seeing. And it looks like Joe Lewis has arrived. What is good, Joe?
Hey, what's going on? I guess I'll change the thing.
Take your time.
Um, I haven't done this in ages. Turn this on. Cool. All right, that was easy. I thought it'd be harder than it actually
All right,
was.
let me
So we're
switch
good.
this up. Cool.
All right, let me take and move this.
Glyphosate isn't particularly dangerous. It's been used for decades with very little, if any, evidence of real harm. Yeah, I think it was the whole point that 100% of the Girl Scout cookies tested positive for lead at the least, and 4 out of 5 of the heavy metals. So the class action lawsuit is, I think, going for like 5 million at this point. Yeah, the Girl Scout lawsuit seeks 5 million in damages from U.S. cookie purchasers for alleged violations of New York consumer protection laws. I don't know if this is going to go throughout all states. They're going to bankrupt the Girl Scouts. What was once an institution. Well, glad to have you, Joe.
Yeah, no.
I was inspired to have you on from seeing some of the things that you were putting into the chat about things that we can do in the current climate where Democrats are not in control to actually see progress happen here in these United States.
Okay.
But please, by all means, give yourself an intro.
I don't know. I don't really do much. I just work a lot now. So, I mean, I have a YouTube still, so that's still my name. I have a Substack where I occasionally post just like things that are on my mind. But like I mentioned, like I just stopped streaming. One, because I was busy, and two, just I lost the, um, what's the word? Motivation. I guess is a good way of describing it. But I'm still around. Obviously, I'm in Discords, talking about things. So it's kind of where my existence has been as of recently. And it's been peaceful, very, very peaceful. CPS isn't calling my house for shit. So I'm not getting in trouble with other grown ass men. So
Are you alluding to the Ethan Klein stuff?
yeah, no, people have a lot of people are very passionate about that. Listen, I don't know. It's kind of indicative to why I stopped streaming, where it just isn't like if you have a lane that you want to go to and what you want to do, I think you just very blindly commit to that. But that whole corner of the internet is so susceptible and vulnerable to drama that it just very much turned me off. And then considering like I do political content or did political content, especially streaming, it was just too close to the fire in terms of that. Like I appreciate the relationships I have from that. Thankfully I didn't burn a lot of, I shouldn't say I burned some bridges, but nothing of substance where it's like, you know, I'm on good terms with all the people that people don't like, and I'm on terms with people that some people just hate. I'm glad I can still like say hi to those people and see how they're doing. But all in all, like I'm glad I'm not in that whole clusterfuck anymore. So
I mean,
I don't know if that was an intro or just me lamenting, but
it
yeah.
was good. A lot of people are moving away from what was once Twitch poll because a couple Dans decided to pop off and destroyed ad revenue for a great deal of people. So people are kind of migrating over to TikTok and YouTube at this point. So I mean, the fact that you're still around, still doing things, we're happy to see your face.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just a product of it. It was never a sustainable thing in the first place. It was very clear very early on, if you caught on to it, it just kind of was just a social club that people wanted. And they just thought by virtue of membership of that club, that opens up opportunities. And it did for some people. It's just that that wasn't a sustainable venture if you were looking to have like any type of actual collective action against anything. Um, and apparently everybody was fucking each other. So it's just like, I don't know.
Apparently.
um so again, like look, like it makes every photo that was ever taken or clip of that whole corner very cool. But it has more questions than it has answers. So I'm glad it's everybody's just kind of doing their own thing. I think it's necessary.
It's a good thing. So this is kind of spurred because I have my own particular issues with the parties in question.
Sure.
In the more recent years, looking at the political landscape, have been seeing the Democrat Party more like the party I've always wanted to stay the hell away from, which is the party of Reagan and Thatcher. It feels like the Democrat Party is more and more in line with corporate interests and are moving further right than my taste will want to allow for. The other issue is I'm looking at a pretty much on its face fascistic regime coming up, squashing abilities for freedom of speech, destroying the federal government, any social programs that are coming through. This bothers me more than even putting Reagan into office, if that were on the table at this point. So, with the current political climate being what it is, what can we do to try to help America stay on track and actually maybe push or align for some legislation to come through once this insanity is over with or during this insanity, in your opinion?
Hmm. Um, I support immediacy of people's conditions. I think in the short term, I think that's the easiest thing that people can do. Um, so I think now is more than a time than ever to support local initiatives and local organizations based upon the fallout that might occur. So an example of this is if you're aware that there might be cuts in particular aid programs, then I think it's a good opportunity to join organizations that are directly within that aid. So that could be something as simple as if you know, for example, that the situation for food going in and out of Gaza and direct support is very challenging, then maybe link up with the Amenorous supply of different organizations that are selling different clothings and materials, and then those goods end up being supporting for Palestinians and those in Gaza, as an example. Um, because we know that those like it's going to take a lot of people to help those in need, and they can get any of the help that they get. Like the crowdfunding movements within that have been very, very good for those who are able to um, contribute or even just do whatever. I know my girlfriend and I have contributed to some. We do what we can. Um, but then when we're talking about something that's not like a geopolitical thing, I think that supporting local organizations that are helping those within your community is a very easy way to at least start getting the ball moving in terms of involvement. I think we have more of an involvement problem than we actually have a political problem. Um, I think Donald Trump's administration showcases a lot of despair in people and the exploitation of that despair. And I think it's time to recognize that across all ideological spectrums. People are struggling, and neither party can ignore that. Um, I think one of the more disgusting things that the Democratic Party did in this past election cycle was basically hand wave all of the signs that Americans weren't doing well post COVID. Both parties were very, I don't know how you want to even describe the word. I guess careless is the most charitable that I have. That, you know, we're not past the pandemic. It hasn't ended. People are still getting sick. People's communities are still affected by this, and both parties and the entire apparatus of market capitalism was like, no, like, it's over. Like, it's been 2 years, time's up. And it's like, no, this, like, we're already what, five, we're still only halfway through this. When touring news was still around, he said, get ready for a long decade. And I pretty agreed with that sentiment then, and I agree with it now. I think it's going to take a decade or longer for us to come out of whatever this environment that we're currently in, and then we won't know how bad the damage is until we're long out of it. And by then, it's going to be very much. By then, I don't know what you're going to do. Um, but I will say that, like I mentioned, finding organizations that you're passionate about and help wherever you can. Um, as much as I am apprehensive over groups like the DSA, I do appreciate that there are those who are saying that, hey, join the DSA, join X or Y political organization. Like, there's all these groups need help, and everybody has different skills and tools that they can use to assist. And I think that's like sort of the opportunity. But unfortunately, for a lot of people, either they don't know where to start, or they feel that they're too busy or too X, Y, and Z. And I emphasize with that. Um, I hold a lot of different hats in places too, and I do what I can outside of my other obligations. But at the same time, I think now is the best time ever to try to find your footing to get out there and get some work done.
And I think that's a reasonable part of the problem. A lot of people just aren't involved on any tier of what's going on. They're not necessarily getting out there to push for local candidates or to push for anything in larger government. They're not necessarily getting their boots on the ground to push for initiatives as things are going wrong here and abroad. So,
Yeah.
like, when people, like, I definitely empathize with what's going on in Gaza, what's going on in Ukraine, what's going on in all these different places. I also look at what the Trump administration is doing to farmers as they're pulling aid from farmers that give food to food banks for Americans that are struggling as well.
Right.
So we're going to have to do these things here in the meantime as well. It just hasn't hit us yet. So, what do you think we should be doing to like push for local or push for change within the government itself?
I think any effort to embolden and cultivate a culture of striking is the way forward. I think we need to push for better unitization overall. And on top of that, just a much stronger culture around the idea of striking, the idea of protest, and the idea of people speaking their, I don't want to say their mind, but being able to like outcry if they believe something to be wrong or unjust. Um, I think that it's very easy to take the side of corporations and the wealthy when it comes to things like unitization and the things like striking. An example of this recently, Angel Reese was talking about how if there isn't any type of, and I'm paraphrasing here, but basically she floated the idea of striking and the WNBA striking for better pay. And I'm at the position, I'm like, that's fantastic. And I think that the NBA should follow suit. Like, I think that's totally reasonable for the NBA, as an example, during the WNBA season to just completely not participate in off-season activities. and then threatened that, hey, unless you do right by the WNBA, we're not even going to come. We're not only going to not show up for the off-season activities and immiserate whatever cost you want to throw at us, but also for the regular season. Um, because the power of stoppage, I think, is stronger than any like day protest or day strike of, oh, don't buy Tesla. Okay. But I think there's something much stronger that to say that it's much stronger to say that an entire um sales fleet, when I say sales fleet, I mean like repair fleet or what have you, of like, hey, we're no longer fixing Tesla vehicles. Like, we collectively, as engineers working for this company, will no longer repair vehicles. And then just hold the line there. I think that type of stoppage is much stronger than going to some type of like graffitiing Teslas or selling back your Tesla, that type of thing. So I think that any opportunity we have to support people striking and to support people unionizing is I think the way forward. And I believe that if Democrats want any semblance of a future, I think that's an avenue that they ought to embrace. They ought to embrace the strike. They ought to work towards legislation that helps embolden the strike in such a way that they're out of the way as an oppositional force, regardless of who strikes, and try to whatever avenue they can to galvanize and embolden workers. Because, like, for me, this is a cross ideological thing. We don't think about the ideology of our coworkers when we show up to work every day. It doesn't matter. There's tasks to be done. There's things to be had, as far as like the day has to go. And the last thing you're worried about is the person next to me at the USPS a Republican? Is my is my teacher colleague a conservative libertarian? It doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, like, um their future and their occupation is just as important as yours. So we ought to embrace that. We ought to embrace like our similarities across ideological spectrums and embrace things that we have the right to do. We have the right to protest. We have the right to strike. And any opposition of that, I think, is not productive.
So,
And this is including fields that people don't like. 'Cause I see your chat's having a fun time trying to justify why these fucking femmes shouldn't deserve pay commensurate to their labor. Like, and that's kind of what I'm talking about. We have a culture that, when we start talking about like, hey, these people deserve a fair wage commensurate to the time that they commit to this thing, then all of a sudden we want to make a bunch of like a 5,001 excuses, when in reality we know that, hey, if we had the opportunity to collectively bargain for a better pay, like, we do that immediately. Like, this is like a no-brainer. Um,
so where I work, they tend to like to threaten strike whenever negotiations come up.
mhm.
And usually the talk around the water cooler is they aren't going to pay me if I strike. I'm barely making rent. So staring down the barrel, like at the time when these talks were going on, we weren't staring down the barrel of a recession. Well, we were, we just didn't know it because this was like,
Right.
I want to say around the COVID era. So now that we're in a position where it's like almost guaranteed we're going to be in a recession, damn near a depression, they're talking government shutdowns, they're talking about services being curtailed. How do we motivate people to strike when there may be nothing that can be done?
The One of the things I thought was really interesting during the strikes at Princeton University was that people were open and willing to support each other materially, because they knew what exactly was at stake when these things don't go your way, right? So an example of this is, I'll just make like a hypothetical. Like, let's say everybody at Twitter or X, however you want to describe it,
Dead
did
name
not
it.
go to work. Yeah, but they chose not to go to work. They said that, hey, we don't agree with Elon's practices. We believe that his time is better spent working with us to make this website better. And until he leaves the Doge or whatever the fuck, we won't show up to work. Their conditions will be agitated by this strike, by a strike of that magnitude. The stoppage will be immense and loud if this were to happen, but the conditions of those working is going to be agitated. And one of the things I think is very powerful for people, I say powerful in a negative connotation, is just the agitation of going back to work, of all of my, whether it be my salary or my hourly pay, I'm no longer receiving that. I still have bills to pay. I still have types of like thing. I still have needs that have to be met. Something that my girlfriend's job has is essentially what they call a slush. And basically what that is that, hey, if something were to happen to you while you're with us in this job, um, we have, I don't think they do this anymore, but at the time, like, it's like, hey, if like something happens to you that's poor, we have this fund that's just all the other workers' money. It's basically, hey, contribute what you can, if you'd like, and if something were to go south, you can request. It's like, hey, I need help. This is how much I need. And then they collectively agree upon whether they ought to do that type of support. And I think that for all jobs in the immediate, I think that that's an easy thing to rationalize within your worker base of like, hey, we are all people who have things happen to us. And sometimes those things are great and immense. So why don't we just agree that, hey, we're going to set aside 5% of our paychecks or whatever we can in order to make sure that, hey, if something were to happen to one of us or all of us, we all collectively set money aside that we can use in these type of cases. Now, granted, like I said, a strike of X workers might not be reflective of a slush fund, but at the very least, I think that that's something that you can work within your community to garner support for, where it's like, hey, I don't have the direct means to support your organization um consistently, but let me just contribute to this place's slush fund every once in a while, like to this, like, and then like when it actually hits to being something serious, then that can be utilized in however way the workers see fit. um because I think the hardest part of striking is the fact that people's material conditions aren't going to get met during that strike. And obviously, as we've seen, that's used as a pressuring tool, because basically, I don't want to get too fucking, I don't know what the word is, but the powers that be basically are saying that, like, hey, we know that, hey, if we just wait this out, you're going to get a little hungry, your lights are going to go off, and then you're going to just crawl to the table and then just kind of agree to whatever you want. And that's a vulnerability that I think if you are looking to advocate for better unionization, that you are looking to advocate for emboldening the strike, that's like an aspect of that I think it's important to think about. Like, it's not just a matter of, for me at least, galvanizing and emboldening the strike is a matter of like just a right, but there's also other things around that that you have to engage with practically. You have to engage with the mutual aid that's going to be required in order to make sure that people's needs are met.
So when I was working for the import industry, it was like my first job. I think it was around 2001, 2002, and the port decided to strike.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, everybody in that industry is losing their mind. The owners of the freight forwarding companies are literally hiding under their desks from the phone calls that are coming from the people whose freight is sitting at the port. There was
Yeah.
a pretty swift end to that. when I'm working in services, you don't get that same reaction, unfortunately.
No.
And knowing that that reaction isn't there, and knowing that it's possible to wait people out, I think is kind of by design of the system itself. They want to keep people in the position where they're going to be able to be waited out if anybody complains. And I think one of
Right.
the more interesting things was what we saw during the pandemic when food service workers all of a sudden weren't showing up to work, weren't wanting to deal with the masses. All of a sudden, they had to start offering more goods or more pay for the services. So all of a sudden, you start seeing $20 minimum wage. You start seeing managerial positions going up to $40, things like that. Like, how can we affect something similar to that to where there is more impetus on the employers to give more so that if this comes down, people aren't living paycheck to paycheck the way they are?
Yeah, I think we got to do I think there's a few things there for me. One thing that comes to mind outright is, I guess, as a preference or preface, is these are not, at least for me, these are not initiatives and tasks that are going to happen overnight. Right, you're still going to have, as we see with the unitization of Starbucks, the unitization of Amazon, it's a very slow and deliberate process. But the thing that I think is very important is to, for lack of a better term, get on the dance floor. Where if you try to unionize your local, whatever the thing may be, like unionize your local, I'm going to say card shop is not the greatest example, but like your local game store, your or even looking into the idea of siding or joining an already pre-existing union. That's a powerful thing. Um and to your point, what we saw during the pandemic was, at least in my eyes, the overt agitation of of the whole, the entire, not only the conditions of workers but the entire system, or at least the entire system in certain avenues. Like, for example, if you have your um if you have all the teachers say that I'm not going in person, I'm going virtual, and we're going to stand by that, and they have a union behind them that supports them, then that's that. Or better yet, I think that it's totally understandable to, for, and I hate to say this, like, if you, I think it's a morally just act if you stand by something within your job and you lose your job over it. Like, I think that's a just action to happen. Where, like, if you protest or strike and then your job lets you go, then I think that's stronger than just staying and scabbing. I think it's stronger to say that, hey, I lost my job by exercising my rights. And that's enough to get, and again, like, for me, it's it's not ideological for me. Like, there's obviously going to be some overlap for people, but I think it's very simple of like, if there's something within your if there's something within your place of employment and you don't agree with it, you have the right to stand up and say, I don't agree with this. We can deal with the semantics of like, is this justified or not later. That's why I supported teachers not going in person, regardless of whatever their religious beliefs and whatever anti-vax perspective you could throw for your argumentation to try to be like, well, they're anti-vaxxers, so why would we support the protests of anti-vaxxers the same way you support the protests and strikes of people who are striking for against Target or striking against Costco. um I think that what's important to recognize is that we're in a moment that this is going to be a slow and arduous process of getting politicians who are sympathetic to strikes, getting politicians who are sympathetic to unions, and then standing on that as a matter of principle, where, like, asking your representatives in election cycles, like, what are your thoughts on the unitization of employees. And I think that like supporting legislation for mandatory unions, I think is a very healthy thing. What that tends to look like in practice is if your job hits a certain cap of workers, then they must be a part of a union. And you still keep the apparatus where you don't have to join the union, but the union has to be an option for you as a laborer. And just because you are not part of that union doesn't mean you are excluded from the benefits that that union might bring. So just because you're not part of the collective bargaining of a wage increase and you get a and they agree on a wage increase, you still get that wage increase, even if you're not a union member. It just means that by not being a member of the union, you're just not part of that process. And if you want to be part of that process, the option is there for you. It's not this arbitrary fight in the case of Amazon where they're just trying to make sure that these dirty poors don't unionize against us or um or what have you. I think that like you can support politicians who support unionization, support striking, because in the current moment it's not there. Like let's just kind of keep it real. Like we're in a situation that even there are people who are unironically trying to position that one dude from what was that labor union? I forget the guy's name, but they were saying that how he should be Kamala Harris's VP. I forget his name. Biden was with him a few times. I
Don't
forget
know
which
who
union. The
exactly.
union president. I forget the dude's name.
The um,
But
I'm trying to remember. Was it the rail union worker?
yeah, I think
Okay.
so. Um, and again, his name escapes me right now. But like, we don't have a culture of unions that says that hey, a pro union, like a union president as VP, is going to like push the needle one way or another. Um,
Sean Fain? No, that can't be the one. This.
yes, Sean Fain. Sean
Oh,
Fain.
okay.
Um, and he kind of sucks. So it's like, that's a whole other thing. I don't want to get too deep in the idea of Sean Fain, but it's like we lost the mark so much that like we're trying to act like one president of an automobile workers union is enough to galvanize people towards a pro union, pro strike America, and that's just not it. Like that, like, and again, like he wouldn't even be because of how the DNC operates. He wouldn't even be a like heavily pro union, um, pro strike politician if he was put into that context because it would just be beholden to the DNC whenever they operate. They would just be like, okay, you're optically an individual, like you're optically the union guy, but that's all you are. You are optically the face of like being pro union sentiment.
You're not helping me, Joe. You're not helping me one bit.
I
So
don't
I'm gonna
know.
I'm gonna run back a couple steps. So as I
Yeah.
stated, my issue is that the Democrat Party is more and more run by corporate. The
Yes.
fact that corporate is running so much within the DNC lets you know that that unions are damn near off the table because corporations don't want unions. I think everybody should unionize. I think all work
Mm,
structures in America should unionize. What I'm pointing at is that particularly fun moment during the pandemic when everybody had some form of protection, be it in not having to pay rent, be it in getting unemployment higher than they were able to get, that all of a
yeah.
sudden you saw a collective, you know what, fuck it, we're not showing up to work. And corporate
Mm.
had to bite it. So,
Oh,
is
right,
there
right,
any
right.
way
And
we can
then
create conditions to where people can actually do something like that?
I see what you're saying. Yeah, my bad. I got a
Oh no,
little
you're
lost in the weeds
good.
there.
You're good.
Yeah, yeah.
You're
Um,
hitting all the notes, but it's
I'm
like that one little condition changed
yeah,
so
yeah. That one
much.
core. Yeah, it's. I don't think. Uh, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if we're ever going to have the conditions like the pandemic to embolden that. But I think we can take like small steps, right? Like fighting for. I think I think this is the perfect opportunity, as an example, to fight for a higher federal minimum wage. This makes the absolute most sense to me, where we're talking about a sliver, not even like again, depending on the numbers, I have to double check, but there's not a substantial amount of federal workers that are even hourly in the first place. So it just seems like a no brainer where, hey, if you are going to get a government job, if you're even on about government jobs after what Donald Trump is choosing to do to federal workers, at the very least, you know, your pay is substantive so that you can have this thing. And I think that that would also create pressure um, elsewhere. Like something that comes to mind, there's a local plaza that's right by my house. And one of the stores, like the grocery store, like the main grocery store that's there, is offering my state minimum, which at the time
Jeez.
is 15.14. The McDonald's across the street is offering 20. So why on earth would you work at a grocery store at state minimum when McDonald's across the street is offering 20? And then all of a sudden, that same grocery store, the language was up to 21 an hour. And it's like, oh, so we know we understand, like we like they like we can see how in a lot of cases they're like we know that in some cases these companies, whether it be corporation, like larger scale corporations or just even just larger scale chains, it's not a matter that they don't want to pay their employees. It's a matter that they want to. I mean, it is a matter they want to pay their employees. Let's
Yeah,
make
that's
that.
actually what it
Let's
is.
just make that fucking clear. But like, it's not this like, it's not some type of idea of like, oh, market regulation. It's not this idea of market regulation or stuff like that. It just shows that hey, they have the ability to do this thing, and sometimes it takes others doing it for you to. And like, it's embarrassing that it takes a local McDonald's to bait out like another company of doing that. Um,
Because from what I see, the
but
corporations are literally lobbying to keep minimum wages lower within the states.
right.
And so, with
Or
them
they'll,
having the power to do so, we end up in this position that until push comes to shove, they're never going to raise those rates. And we've seen minimum wage going up all throughout America because finally it's
right.
understood that, you know, the workers aren't going to be happy, cost of living is way too high. And these things have started to work their way up, but it's still not nearly enough.
Right. This is why the again, I'm trying to be nice here, but this is why the
Don't be
Democratic
nice.
Party is. It's why the Democratic Party is a very frustrating party if that's something that you support, and it puts its supporters in a lot of contradictions, where they'll say that like Donald Trump has showed that a few things. He showed that he is the most radical president in everybody's lived existence who's currently alive today. And as far as people who are within my age group and all the presidents that I've experienced, he's the most radical by far. Um, and with that radicalism, and again, it's a radicalism that's right wing. It's a radicalism that feigns on support of the oligarchy, that has like adjacency to dictatorships and all the bad words that you can think of. But at the same time, it shows that every time Democrats said they can't do something, they were lying. It's not a matter that they can't do something; it's that they won't. Like they're they spent this whole time saying, "Well, we can't have single payer health care." Well, you could. It's just you didn't care enough, and you didn't have the will to try to fight for that. And then what happens is it puts its base of supporters in this really precarious position where they basically have to run defense on their incompetence. Like this is why I emphasize with Kamala Harris supporters. They have to run defense for Joe Biden's arrogance, his egotistical maniac geriatric behavior that led to him when it was unavoidable handpicking his successor and then we're supposed to act like elections are, and then and then like it's up to those who support Democrats try to convince everybody, well, no, this actually wasn't corrupt. We obviously wanted Kamala Harris too. We like acting like the vice president now all of a sudden is just as important on the ticket than the president. It's like, get the fuck out of here. Like there's no, and just admitting that, like, and I have a few folks in my circles that go, yeah, that was fucked up. Like he clearly was power hungry. He clearly was afraid, and he wanted to hold on to power, and is holding on to power. And again, like, not, I don't think he was going to win, regardless of him being in or not. But in the face of in the face of an obvious loss, he passed it off to his VP. And if I was Kamala Harris, I would never forget. I would never even want to be in the same room with him. Like, it's disgusting. Like, um, because it showed a lot, and again, like I say that to say that what's going to have to happen in the next few years is shooting for, it sounds so cliche to say, but it's kind of like shooting for the stars insofar as Donald Trump is revealing that everything you believed about not things not happening is bullshit. He's showing you that it's bullshit. And now's the perfect opportunity to, in the face of his madness, to shoehorn some things and come up with good arguments. Like if I'm somebody in the if I'm a Democrat right now, I'm not fighting against the Department of Education. Don't fight against it. If he wants to reduce it, reduce it. And then build the argument of how can we make this organization, the Federal Department of Education, do better by everyone? Because as much as teachers were bullied and harassed during COVID, so were citizens during school board meetings without any way to protect themselves. They had people coming in with guns at board meetings all over the country. They had overt white nationalist and extremist groups infiltrating and observing school board meetings. And imagine if you're the cop. Imagine you're just like, oh, I gotta go to the school board meeting at 3 fucking hours. Like usually it's pretty boring, but I'm just gonna stand in the back. Why are there 15 people with fucking AKs in the back just standing there and standing by? Like, and I think it's an easy argument to make of like, yeah, we ought to reconfigure this organization so that it can do better by not only the students but the civilians who are going and politically active, as well as the teachers. Because clearly there's a vulnerability that existed within there that there was nothing that they could do. Like, say what you want about Merrick Garland, the whole domestic terrorist comment, that meant nothing because there was no answer. So you can call the people who are showing up to these domestic terrorists and piss off a bunch of parents, but it clearly had no teeth because that's not how the Department of Education handles reporting of situations like that. So, like it's just kind of how it is. And then it's like you also have pockets of like, hey, as much as you want to, like, I understand the claim to be made about, say, for instance, the election being stolen. Okay, fantastic. If you believe the election's being stolen, bring forth the evidence. And what we found was that there were a lot of politicians who had no care for their job and ruined the trust of their local whether it be I forget the position, but the person who's responsible of the ballots themselves. It's just one in my township. It's just one little old lady. She's been in a position for 20 plus years, and all elections run through her. And the idea that she would, and she didn't do this, but I'm saying, like, the idea that one of these individuals whose like sole responsibility is to preserve the integrity of elections went out of their way in certain areas to just do some fuck shit with ballots or try to do like fault, like do fake certification. That's an easy argument to make if you're a Democrat and you're like, hey, as much as we disagreed with your claim, I still believe that you have the right to bring forth this claim. So let's work together to figure out a better way to navigate with certification so that we don't have nonsense like this moving forward. You can absolutely bring forth your claim to the table, but it's very clear that depending on the timing of the claim and all the semantics around that, it could be a situation where states and local municipalities take forever to certify election results. And this problem is not going away. Like there's no, like it's very clear that there's a vulnerability within the electoral system that if you want to get people to trust that better, then now's the opportunity to throw whatever radical idea you have and try to shoehorn in that with all this right-wing bullshit. Like I think now is the opportunity. I think now is the time more than ever because they don't have anything to stand on.
So you said the magic words. So on Monday, I watched through the entire painful hour and a half or so of Gavin Newsom giddy and shaking in his seat, hanging out with Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
So as you're seeing the Democrat Party move closer to people like this and try to figure out what strategies they're using to seemingly try to mimic similar strategies, a lot of people, I don't know if yourself was included in that, are saying, hey, the reason why everything went shit is because they ignored the left and they tried to squelch the left. And the people on the right are saying, well, it's because Democrats weren't listening to the right. And it seems like they're listening to those people more than they're listening to people that said move more left. What would people get if Democrats were to move more to the left? And how could the Democrat Party maybe try to assimilate with the left without the conflict? Because, like, honestly, people on the left don't like the Democrats and people on the right don't like the Democrats.
Yeah. Well, so here's my personal frustration with Dems. I want to make it very clear that I disaggregate this from local Democratic politicians to state level and above. Like these all function very differently. And their aspirations are very different. Like it's still very jarring to me that my Senator Cory Booker, in the face of Palestinian protesters at one of his rallies, was shouting, column A all the way, column A all the way, which for people who don't understand, in my state, we have we have county line voting. We have the county line, but we don't have the county line, but it's being challenged in courts. Basically what happens is every single one of my counties votes to determine the order of the ballot. And basically what that means is exactly what it sounds like, what people are on each column of the ballot. So if you have, for instance, a county that supports Donald Trump, then congratulations, Donald Trump will be the first member farthest to your left on your ballot if you're voting. And they found that it's a intense statistical advantage. Intense. It's like 80% plus likely for people to vote for you if you're on that line. And it's corrupt as shit. It's corrupt as shit. So something that comes to mind for me when it comes to like the idea of like how do we get people moving left, how do we get people moving in a direction, I think it's easier to understand that, well, first off, just understand how deeply corrupt elections are. Like I live in a state where it's the corruption's overt. Like just for context, not all of the Green Party members in my across all the ballots in my state, they didn't have their own line. So the Green Party had a line, but not all the candidates ended up on their line, which is crazy. The like the Communist Party had one candidate in column C, another in candidate column E, another in column F, A, B, C, D, E, F. So 6 ways all the way down. Like no one's looking there. And then there was a fight over the font and how like they found that people who have candidates who have a larger font are more likely for people to vote for you and vote for that cause if your font is bigger. So our ballots are just corrupt as shit. And something that like everybody ideologically came together and said is that, yeah, these are fucked up. Like you don't have to be a Republican or Democrat or what have you to go, wow, it's kind of ridiculous that each one of these individual counties are not only directly deciding the order of their own ballots, but then also saying that, hey, if we make this one a little bigger here, a little smaller there, we can essentially cheat our way into a maintaining power if you're in a Republican stronghold or maintaining power if you're a Democratic stronghold. And now we're fighting with that legally. So I think the challenge and the way to approach is finding those things that you don't need ideology to explain why we ought to do it. And that's going to be the onus of politicians not trying to make these ideological slants because they want to make these ideological slants because they want to stay in power. And like in my eyes, it's like, do you want to help people or do you want to stay in power? Like if your goal is to help people, then you're going to have to help people where they're at. And the challenge is going to be what those things are and coming to a conclusion, whether no matter what party you support, coming to a conclusion about what those things are and then garnering support that way. Like instead of having targeted door knock campaigns where you go into a Democratic area and just talk to Democrats, all like Democrat or Democrat curious people about supporting Kamala Harris, why don't you go to a district that's deep red and find out what they're passionate about and not have to paint it like, oh, like, sure, you're going to have to paint it in some level of transparency of like, hey, I'm here with this campaign. I'm not trying to pitch you on why you ought to vote for this person. I'm trying to hear you out of what you need, what your concerns are. And sure, you're going to find some people with like far-fetched concerns, but there's going to be through lines. Like it being poor is still poor no matter what state you're in. It's just going to be like that level of poverty is going to be different, but the through line is that these people are poor. The through line is that these students are struggling educationally. The through line is that certain services are incredibly difficult. Like it took COVID for states to realize like, oh, our unemployment systems are all sorts of fucked up. Maybe like we should modernize this thing and it shouldn't take the whole like the agitation of that system for people to like actually care about these things. So it's like, hey, we reckon, and we got to be proactive about it, where it's like, I think it's really like it's simple to go to a bunch of people and say like, our unemployment system is outdated. I would hate to see you in a position where you have to use these outdated systems to work on your claim. So like here, can you help us support this petition for funding to improve the unemployment portals? Or like, hey, we don't even know we don't even have proper tracking or proper data collection for these areas. So maybe like as much as you want to be apprehensive about immigrants, like that's fine, but we don't even know how many people actually live in this area in the first place. So we need better data collection. Like, would you support the helping towards the expansion of like whether it be census data collection or what have you. Like there's easier measures that Democrats can have, but it's going to be, and Republicans for that matter. But it's just understanding of like people are people first before their ideology, and I think that both parties get that wrong. Like they think that people are walking around. Like I think Republicans unironically think trans folks are just walking around shouting the communist manifesto with they all have different types of hair that changes with the flick of their iPhone and shit. And it's like, no, like you'd be surprised how many trans folks are conservative. And you'd be surprised at how many, like the leader of what's that far right party? Is it France? One of them is gay. One of them is a lesbian, I should say. I forget her name. But like the irony, I forget the woman's name. I want to say it's Germany or France, where the leader of that far right group is a lesbian. And maybe your chat can like figure out who this lady is. But like there's like the irony of your far right organization that is in charge of whatever your policy prescriptions, the extrapolation of that is you don't exist or you can't marry your girlfriend. Like it's crazy. But my point there is that people are themselves before their ideology and
As he
engaging
said,
with
Jada
it.
Pinkett Smith.
Yeah. Oh, Lord have mercy.
No, we saw like at the RNC, we saw a lot of people like they were championing Blair White and all sorts of people you wouldn't have expected, and they're willing to like bring people in. But I think it's a pretty messed up tool in itself. But
Right.
at the same time, I'm wondering if possibly Trojan horsing people in isn't the better answer. Like when you look at Donald Trump, who was a Democrat, who basically subverted the entirety of the Republican Party, is by most people's standards not a Republican, but won that vote. Same goes with Bernie being an independent, which most people considered a socialist, going under the Democrat banner. Would more Trojan horsing in of candidates be a better answer all the way around?
I don't think so, because what ends up happening. So, for those of you who have, like, I hate doing that whole like audience thing, talking to the audience, but also talking to you. But basically, Sarah McBride is what the first openly trans representative in Congress. There was some buzz because the Republican head, or this is the Republican chair, or the Republican head of the committee that she's on, just openly misgendered her. And I found it very funny because Republicans have been doing that since January. And all of a sudden, there was this virtue signaling nonsense. And like, I posted a tweet of like, I hate to break it to y'all, but Sarah McBride and her trans identity and as it relates to like how she governs means nothing to her. So misgendering her does absolutely nothing. It does nothing except make the dude look like an asshole. So she's not engaging with that. But it's really embarrassing. I think it's very embarrassing. To make sure I'm very clear what I'm trying to say here. I think like if somebody does something overtly racist to me and I don't respond, but you respond, you're a fucking moron. Like that's just where I'm at. Where like if somebody does something overtly like disrespectful or whatever, and then you have to stop the whole fucking room just to be like, how dare you? You're out of line. And then you see her, she's just chilling. Like, and I bet you, like, if she had the opportunity to speak, which she didn't, it was just like, she was like, oh, it's fine. This is the same representative who said, I'm using I'm not using women's bathrooms. I'm using men's bathrooms when I'm in Congress. And if they just asked me about it, I would have said that. So you have, and then like, it just looks ridiculous because then you have that one woman, I forget her name. She looks like 40 and 60 at the same time. She's like this hate boner against Sarah McBride. I forget the rep's name.
I remember. I know you're talking about.
Yeah, but it's like she cares more about Sarah McBride being trans than I think Sarah McBride does. She's just trying to go to work, and it's like, Nancy Mace. And if you if you take the bait of being performative and being, oh, I can't believe it, then you're the embarrassing one. Like you're the one who's trying to get somebody somebody like I don't know. It's just like that aspect to me is just so incredible because it shows how empty the Democrat Party is, where it's like you're more than willing to like say this, but your motherfucker got censured in public over fucking yelling at the president. So why like pick and choose your battles, you dumb fucks? Like there's no
Isn't
like
that crazy to
I
you
forget.
that Al Green is like probably doing the most at this point? He's the only one that's put up
Yeah.
articles of impeachment. He's the only one that didn't act like he was in a silent auction the entire time. Like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I say all that to say about like when it comes to for example, like infiltration, because I'm very critical of Sarah McBride because her being trans has nothing to do with her as a politician. Like, and it's very clear based on how she talks, how she moves, and how she advocates that she is just another establishment Democrat shill that is just part of the carryover of the Democratic Party. Insofar as like she's she's groomed in the same way that Bernie Sanders groomed AOC, where it's like AOC is like, oh, I had the same junior position as you did when you started, Bernie Sanders, and he's like, ah, ha, ha. I made sure that was Kate. I made sure that was so. Like, there's no, like, like these people are basically, because Bernie, no, like, listen, Bernie's gonna die soon. Let's just get that out. Like, take a deep breath, get it out of your system. This man is going to die soon. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but I don't think he's making it to my 50th birthday, and I'm 36. So, um, and I say that to say is that they're aware of that. So they need people to be the successor of whatever nonsense they're trying to do. And I think for Bernie Sanders, his strength is for lack of a better term, the socialism curious people. Like his job is if these people start getting too high on socialism, they start listening to Richard Wolff a little too much. Chris Hedges, they get they get that Brianna Joy Gray subscription. They start watching some leftist content online. Then Bernie Sanders comes in and says, "Wait, wait, wait! I might run again." It's like, oh, okay. I'm going on tour. Like this man is going on tour. It might as well be the poor whites tour of like, damn, we lost the poor whites. Who can galvanize the poor whites? Bernie Sanders can galvanize the poor whites. So we're gonna let him go to all these going to fucking Kenosha. Like what? and and then if you just call that out where it's like, hey, it's kind of weird that all of his places that he's going to have majority poor white populations, but I can't bring that up because it's racist, or is he racist for going? I can't figure out which. Because like Democrats are aware of what happened. Like, oh shit, we lost all of these poor rural white folks, and by extension, you probably lost a lot of poor rural non-white folks, and now we got to find ways to bring them back. But what are you bringing to them that makes them want to come back? Except this like faux idea of hope, faux idea of like galvanizing the worker. And it's like, unless you bring something to the table, like there's basically, it's like, hey, I'm hungry. I'm hungry. Give me some food. And Bernie's just like, I'll open the door for you. There it is. Just join us. And it's like, yeah, but how do I get the food to my plate? Well, you know, Congress is very difficult and legislation is a very hard thing. We are working to negotiate to get food on your plate. And then let's go. And then It never happens. The door closes again, and then you're like, damn, this guy over here, he's orange and saying crazy shit, but hey, he's at least he's trying to do things to put food on my plate, even though we know it's bullshit. But at the very least, he's doing something. And then you say like their response to this, like the Democratic response is, he's crazy, but look at what's inside our house. Look at all this food. Like, yeah, I am, and it's like the same cycle. um and that's the part that I'm a little skeptical about. Like, I don't think, as an example, right? Um, what's her name? Sarah McBride is not the trans liberation that people are looking for as a political pundit. She is basically a congresswoman who knows very well and aware if she starts talking too much about trans liberation, trans advocacy, she's Bernie Sanders. She's in Joe Biden's district. She's in Joe Biden's state. Joe Biden lives in Delaware. So at any point, he can do what he did with Kamala, just make a phone call. I want to endorse this person. Let's get her out of here. They'll gladly find another trans person, a trans woman or trans man to replace Sarah McBride if she gets out of line on issues. Um, and this is true for like any of these politicians, where this is why I think infiltration is dangerous.
So that I pretty much agree with you to a pretty hard line of it in looking at
Yeah,
all the people, like all the Joe Rogans, all the angry Trump voters were like, oh, well, I was a Bernie Sanders supporter and I feel like I got screwed. So now I'm going for this because I definitely don't want you what you guys are giving us. But at the same time, looking at Bernie, looking at Joe, looking at even Trump, these dudes are ancient. I would
yeah,
like to see some new younger blood in there, but the establishment just doesn't seem to be on message for that. And it's kind of like looking at movies. When you see a movie being brought up and they're like, well, who's going to get cast for this? It's people we already know. Whereas I'm
right.
looking like, hey, Star Wars got Mark Hamill, got, Carrie Fisher, got Harrison Ford. We didn't know who they were. They ended up being amazing and changing, movies forever. Can we get some new blood in here?
Yeah, like, oh man, Bernie Sanders. Like, I'm not to drag. Listen, I think that there's a lot of legitimate criticism you can give to the left. Like, I think Black Americans, broadly speaking, in the particular political moment, basically let Bernie Sanders out to dry. But Bernie Sanders does not do himself any favors. Um, but they're like Bernie Sanders supporters are kind of like cyberpunk 2077 fans to me. They all hype up about this fucking game, and then like you you look at it and it's like, oh, this is just a hype train that crashed. No, you don't understand. It's so good now. Just download it again. It's like, between that, like, I don't know what game you start. Like, they're not No Man's Sky fans, but they're pretty close in terms of that nonsense. I'm trying to see, we're on Twitch. I'm trying to keep it like gamey, right? Where it's like, but yeah, but like Bernie Sanders fans are somewhere in between No Man's Sky, Fallout 76, or Mass Effect Andromeda. One of those, there's somewhere in terms of that support where it's like, you understand you guys gotta like understand you're getting played at this point by this man. This man's hustling you hard. And that's why, like, in this particular moment, this whole stuff with oligarchy just is so funny to me. um we gotta fight against the oligarchy. Okay, sure. What's the alternative? Corporations? Like, there's no, that's another whole other thing. But yeah, to your point where it's like, I think that folks need to, when I say folks, I'm speaking particularly about politicians, where I think you need to have a more um firm stance on things that you care about, and like actually like talk to politicians about the things that they care about, because in reality, you can't rely on the parties to produce the candidates that care about these things. And this is both the RNC and the DNC. They just produce they produce a champion that they think is good and that people will agree upon without really like listening to anyone. DNC is like especially detached, I should say, because they think that like you can focus group your way into winning elections.
It's true.
RNC just kind of doesn't care. They're like, we're gonna bring up Trump and you're gonna like it, and it's like, there's no one else, so I guess like they treated this man like an incumbent from the jump, and nobody said anything. Like Donald Trump just functioned in this past election like he was the incumbent president, when in reality, I think that's something you can get people to understand. Of like, as much as you want to give Kamala Harris flack for not doing debates, Donald Trump did none either. And he wasn't an incumbent president. He was a person who had to go through the primaries. So he has to go through debates, and they just allowed him not to do that. And it's like, that's some fucking voter suppression if I have seen it before, where it's like you have a good understanding of all these other candidates, but the one that you're supposed to bring out and say like, this is my champion, we don't know what he stands for, we don't know what he's going to do. And again, there's a bunch of reasons why he didn't do debates, but this is like a thing where it's like, hey, it's pretty, this is what I'm talking about when it comes to like cross ideological spectrums of just looking at a situation and recognizing that's not okay. Where it's like Kamala Harris didn't go through a debate process, Joe Biden didn't go through a debate process, Donald Trump didn't go through a debate process. These are people who are positioned to be the future of the country, and none of them debated. So we got to figure something else out. We got to figure out how we can legislatively, for lack of a better term, force debates, mandatory debates.
I mean,
like if you're running
for the sake of argument, Donald Trump went through a roast battle.
Oh, I mean, yeah. And then like he went on these other things. But to that, where it's like, this is what I'm talking about, where it's like, it's very simple to say, hey, do you want to know about these candidates that you are voting for? Yes. Then they ought to be doing mandatory media appearances. They ought to be doing mandatory debates. That should just be part of the process. Part of the process is that you see Vivek Ramaswamy on TV. Part of the process is you see Jill Stein, like her or not, on TV. Part of the process is that you see these other parties on TV debating with these individuals, and you can chop it up however you like. But these are things that have to happen, and this is where you can galvanize support from major news networks. You can galvanize support from independent broadcasters. There's so many ways of going about it, but that's the point that I'm trying to make here, is that like there are things that happened in the past 4 to 16 years that just weren't okay, and then focusing on and then just focusing on those things instead of trying to just paint every single thing politically and sort of like a political ideological left versus right of like, hey, Elon Musk is the head of some organization that's responsible for job cuts, and we're all just cool with that. We're all just cool with somebody with no political experience determining who is or isn't part of it. And then the president makes a bunch of these weird statements. He's not the leader, but he is the leader. He's my guy. Well, he's a leader enough for you to tweet about him when his company is having problems. And there's no alarms, no bells of like, this is kind of weird. When in reality, it's like, it should be disgusting whoever's up there, regardless of being Elon and Trump. It just so happens that we're just stuck with that. But if it was Jeff Bezos up there with Joe Biden, but it seems like the through line is that all these tech motherfuckers are just be on line with Trump. But it's like, whoever's up there, like it should not be okay in terms of what he's doing.
I
And
definitely agree.
yeah,
So we're gonna head to open, but we're just gonna continue going on until people show up in the open. So I'm
sure.
gonna just switch up the backdrop. And I, something that bothers me. So we had somebody that was pretty much a dark horse show up, which was RFK. And
Sure.
because of the name that was involved, because of some of the good views that this individual had, he seemed like a good candidate. You know, he's talking about getting additives out of food. He's talking about, you know, making America healthier. And then you hear him say, hey, maybe getting the measles is, you know, a healthier thing to do. It's better than getting a vaccine. And then your face drops a little bit. People
Yeah.
still wanted to vote for this dude. People were mad that the Democrat Party supposedly muscled RFK out of the race.
Well, I don't think he. How do I be nice to this man? RFK moved in a way that was kind of similar to Vivek Ramaswamy. I think Vivek understood very clearly that he was not going to get support from a minor political party. And if he were to get support from a minor political party, it would still be incredibly challenging to compete. So I think RFK thought that by being the power of a Kennedy and the power of being Democrat adjacent, he could sort of like infiltrate his way and argue his way into the hearts and minds of people. But I think that for me at least, it's incredibly important. Like I look at RFK and I never saw a Democrat. I never saw a Democrat when he talked and navigated at all. So I think it was like for him running on that ticket was just incredibly dishonest. I think if he positioned himself, and I am defending this man a lot. I think terrible things should happen to him, respectfully, in a video game. But it's I think it's easier for people to say that, hey, I'm independent from these two parties,
Welcome, Rich.
so I ought to move in a way that's independent and just show people exactly what you're up against, because it's not easy. Like the one thing that I think people give third party candidates in particular a hard flack is that it's not only hard to be a member, like somebody running for in that thing, so like within the party itself, but you're going against two deeply established, deeply funded, whether it be by corporations, so like individually wealthy people who disseminate their wealth within companies, which is basically what Democrats are navigating with, or just individually wealthy people who just throw money at people and don't hide their money or wealth behind corporations, which is what you have with Republicans. We know these as corporatists and oligarchs, but I hate using those fancy words. But like, you can't out fundraise these people. You can't out fund these people, and money brings so many opportunities. And it's just calling that out of like, hey, this group, both of these groups, by virtue of my existence, are going to viciously go after me. So you need to look out for that when you see me. You need to look out for that. You need to challenge those. Like if you are a Democrat, like, and you want there to be a fair, free and fair election, then the way that you should pay attention, the way that they go after me as a political opponent. If you want a free and fair election, Republicans, you need to pay attention to how they Democrats and Republicans engage in opposition. Because at the end of the day, at least for me, it's not about it's do your policies lead to a way that it's helping Americans, and are the arguments good? And that's it. Like, at least though that's it for me in the very simpler aspect of it. But I think RFK running on the Democratic ticket was just foolish, absolutely foolish, and And he learned the hard way. Like he learned that like that just wasn't it. It just was not a sustainable thing.
Yeah, because like I've been through multiple cycles, and you had, first it was the Ross Perot, and then it was Ron Paul, I think it was, and then now
Hmm.
it was RFK. Well, no, then it was Bernie, then it was RFK. So like
Yeah.
you have all these dark horses that show up, and you hear a few things, and then eventually you're like, yeah, no, this isn't the one.
Yeah. And then like you gotta go like, wouldn't it be great to see through like a mandatory like some type of mandatory presser? Like you are required to like by virtue of the rule, like you're these people who are on these ballots are required to have media appearances. And that's what you do as a person running. Like it'd be nice to know who these candidates are. It'd be nice to know who Vivek is. It'd be nice to know more about Nikki Haley. It'd be nice to know more about RFK. It'd be nice to know more about Kamala Harris. like, um, but these parties structure themselves in such a way and allow it through their rule structure to just kind of do whatever they want. Where not for nothing, it was refreshing to see debates outside of the RNC and DNC control of like, let's just do it. Like that was a smart decision by Joe Biden. For whoa, look at that. Whoa, write it down. But it was smart to accept, but it was foolish to for Democrats to hide him like he was some precious jewel that needed to get reassessed. Where it's like, look, if this is your guy, you're gonna have to own it. And you're going to have to own this, like in the practical sense, you're gonna have to own this L. You're gonna have to see this all the way through. Again, like this is why I think it's the most disgusting thing that Democrats could one of the most disgusting things
I was
electorally
about to say,
of like
there's kind of a
yeah,
high
of like just
bar.
putting like just putting Kamala Harris out there. Like that was it was just so like thinking back to it, it's just so gross where you put a person in a position where they have no choice. Like, do you really like? Do people genuinely believe that? And I'm wondering this, like, I'm genuinely curious. Like, are there people who believe that she had a choice in the matter?
No, I don't.
Like,
I don't think anybody
um,
believes that she wasn't going to be the candidate, or she had much of a choice not to run once the climate was in place. And like
yeah,
I think most people with reasonable sense know that Joe should have dropped out to begin with.
he should have never ran for reelection. He should have never like put his hat in the ring like that. That should have never been the thing. And he like, God, I really hope history's unkind to him. Like that's that. I don't care about his dead kids. I don't care about his drug addict son. I think history needs to be diabolical to him, the man. You could like do whatever you want with navigating with his externals, but like when it comes to like the choices that he made in his political career, um, yeah, like he should not. No one should let him off the hook about that. He should be dealing with that while for the rest of his cognitive ability. Like, damn, it's so frustrating. Like, I've never seen somebody be able to dodge an L like that. It's just so incredible. Um,
Yeah, he pretty
because
much
again,
sold the
I don't
Democrat
think,
Party up the river. Like I'm not even going to deny
yeah,
it.
and now we're in the situation where, and again, like I had no hope for Democrats anyway. So like this Trump, like I think it was easier. I said this in like multiple discords, where it's like we just gotta like it's easier to mentally prepare for a Trump presidency than it is to prepare for a Harris presidency. Like we would just get just neoliberalism another 4 years. Okay, great. We're going to unconditionally fund Ukraine because they want to kill Russians. We're going to unconditionally fund Israel. Maybe a ceasefire deal. Maybe. Um, but it would just be just more of the same, just kind of, we're just gonna kind of coast through this and be the caretaker. Um, and right now we're just seeing in full force of like what's actually possible that the president can do, what happens when a leader consolidates power in the way that he's trying to do. And it should be concerning that there is no democratic answer. They're just letting this happen. And unless they're planning for just like the biggest reveal of our lives in 1 to 2 years, but I don't know. I do not know.
I don't know. I don't think it was easy to mentally prepare for what we currently have going on because, like, yeah, you knew he was going to try to do some things. You didn't think necessarily that he was going to try to just strong arm the entire political process. Like, yeah, we're just not going to give a fuck about the process of how we get laws made. The Constitution is just a suggestion at this point. So we're just going to go ahead and run this fade. And yeah, I don't think anybody was
Well,
prepared for that.
well, yeah. I mean, like that's kind of it's funny how Doge is presented as it's not funny, it's disgusting, but Doge is presented as this tool to consolidate the government and what's the term that they use? Improve efficiency. Like it's just improve efficiency, improve efficiency.
Yeah, but that's not
There
happening.
there are millions of Americans in this country, which means that there are hundreds of thousands of schools, businesses, just so many different organizational structures that need the federal government to protect them from bullshit. And I am by no means against what Trump is doing in principle. I understand the argument that he's trying to make here. I just know that he's lying. Like he wants to minimize all of the guardrails, and these guardrails are guardrails for um dissent. All like any type of dissent is to be removed and replaced with supporters. So it's the same thing that the Nazis did. It's the same thing that the Bolsheviks did. Like history repeats itself in a different form, where it's like we're watching a man try to consolidate himself into a dictatorship, and there's no answer because the vulnerability was always there. Everything that he's describing could have happened at any point. It's just that Donald Trump got enough idiots together who built the argument to say, yeah, you can do this. Just make a side organization, keep enough distance where if things go south, it doesn't look bad on you. It looks bad on the organization that you created. So you get fault for a shoddy org, in this case Doge, but you don't get in trouble for all of the firings and mishappenings of that. And it's just gross. Like it's just gross to see like a dictator create his own dictatorship. And there's no, and again, like no democratic answer to any of this. I think it's a perfect opportunity to have a response. It's a perfect opportunity to galvanize unionship, galvanize like why just strike. Like if you're in the DOE, just strike. If you're in any of these organizations that are looking to they're trying to cut, it's like, oh, you want to cut this for efficiency? We're not going to show up to work. like we're not showing like we're not only going to show solidarity for the people that you fired, we're going to show you what happens when nobody's here, and we're going to hold that line, and then you're going to see firsthand how fascistic this country actually is, Because then what's going to happen? You're going to see probably the freezing of accounts, the denial of entry of buildings. Um, you're going to see you're going to see like, okay, well, how does the government respond to an entire department that's essential for governmental function not show up to work? And then you now have, and now like, is Doge the collective bargainer of returning these people back? Department of Government Efficiency, like, but we're not. I can't like. These are things I wish could be emboldened. Like, it's just kind of gross to see. Oh, we're gonna show in line and applaud while people pick up their things. When in reality, it's like, if I was in the if I was like working in the federal government in a department that's getting cut or targeted by Doge, I'm just not going to show up to work. I'm going to tell my coworkers, don't show up to work. What are we fucking doing? Like, and then we'll show them, like, this is what happens when we don't show up. And then just see how they respond. And then use that as a leverage of like, hey, and again, like, Democrats have nothing to lose here. Democrats, in my opinion, have nothing to lose. So telling federal workers don't show up to work, do it. Do it.
I'm
Do
interested
it.
in how that
Put
would work out. Because I know
um
when they said they were going to free, like the federal freeze, that didn't actually happen, already like cut off services for over 70 million people.
right.
With that being the case, if people like literally walked off versus the, what was it, firings or furloughs that came down, what would have actually happened?
Sure. Well, think about it this way, right? So we're in the midst of a government shutdown, as is tradition. At this time of the year, we need to pass a budget. Stopgap is no longer stopgapping, so we got to do some budget things. And why isn't there any negotiation of, hey, Republicans, we'll fund whatever you want, but get rid of Doge. We will shut down the entire shit. We will shut the whole shit down. So you have to rely on other means to get your shit done. But we'll help. We'll even fund some of the shit that you're really passionate about, like ICE or whatever the fuck. But you have to pressure the president to absolve Doge. If you're really worried about this organization, like, if you're not willing to shut the entire thing down for something that you care about, what are you doing? um and then like, because the argument's like, well, it's gonna hurt so many Americans. I'm sorry, when's the last time people were like, wow, I'm so glad this strike just lifted up my 401k, my Bitcoin skyrocketed? No, like, a strike is supposed to be an action that is disruptive. It's supposed to disrupt some things, and it's supposed to disrupt some things in a way that brings people to the table. I think nothing better than just like tying budgetary things or monetary things with strikes or whatever you want, whatever you care about substantively, instead of just putting it under nebulous things. You know what I mean? Like, and again, it's dangerous, it's risky, people would get hurt, people's lives would be affected, but I don't know how else you need to send the point. I don't know what else you can do to send the point of, like, if you're really worried about Doge and what Doge brings to the table, and all these job cuts and all these other things you don't agree with, then if you're in the face of a government shutdown, then shut it down. If they need you to cooperate on this, which they do to a broader extent, then go for it. Play the chips. You think Democrats are where are Democrats going to go? Like, where are Democrat supporters going to go? I can't believe they shut down the government. I'm not going to vote for. They're like, these people are cooked. Like, your base is so cooked that you could shut down the government for a month and they would still vote for you. So what do you got to lose? You know?
Wow. That is one way to look at it. I don't really have a strong rebuttal for that.
Yeah, again, like it's I'm not trying to act like it's some easy calculus to come to the conclusion of, but like what else you got? Like what else do they have? Like they're talking about all these things about Donald Trump they're not passionate about, but we saw like one caucus who was like led, like, how do I say this? An action of removing somebody was led by somebody who I think fucks kids but doesn't fuck kids. I don't know. But like Matt Gaetz was directly responsible for completely shaking up the Republican speakership. One man, one dude. And he's like, if you do this, we're gonna make your life miserable. They did the thing, and then he's like, all right, bet. So it's like I don't know. And so again, like Republicans are revealing that like, oh, you can do these things. Like, oh, you can threaten a government shutdown or even get that. You can circumvent a process and get something that you want. Because that was the goal. That was just getting Mike McCarthy out of power. Like that was the goal, and they won. And they crit him so bad that I don't think is he running for reelection again? I don't even remember. Like there's no that man is was critical hit from that. And you can thank Matt Gaetz for it, like, which is something else.
That is crazy, in my opinion. But we're already staring down the barrel of a government shutdown, and there's a pretty. Oh, I mean, they say it so often. I don't even know how real that's going to be
Sure.
at this
Right. It's
point.
just it is the tradition. That is the tradition is we don't agree on a budget. Okay, it's shutting down, shutting down. Oh, up at 2:59 and 30 seconds. They pass a thing, and it's like, oh, okay. See you in September. It's like, um, so I think this is the first time in American history that's possible that a stopgap bill funded an entire year. Um, I don't know. I'm pretty sure it's got to be the first, or at least one of the few anomalies. I have to look that up after the fact.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that ever in my lifetime, so I'd be shocked if it happened before. But they're basically saying the funding bill is just going to be put on the back burner. They're not going to get a bill going, and they're just going to delay it. So we're going to see what
Yeah,
happens with that. I'm not shocked because they only seem interested in breaking things right now. So until they figure out
sure.
what's broken, what's not broken, and put things in place, I don't think they're going to get a spending bill set. I'd be interested to see what happens if the collective of federal employees just stop playing ball. And at this point, like moving into private sector isn't entirely not an answer because you have no job security at this point. And with no job security, I don't see why not doing so isn't a decent answer. But the other problem is once the agencies start back up, what do they do for staffing? And that's
Yeah.
worrisome.
Well, I mean, they as the government gets smaller, it's going to be filled with the privatization. Like Trump said that outright, like, or in some variation of that, talking about how like there's plenty of jobs in the private sector, or some variation of that language. And uh
Yeah, that's actually my fear is that they try to
yeah.
privatize all of these agencies
Right.
and the oversight's going to be non-existent.
Gone. Right, right. And then that allows for Trump to be the closest thing to a god that he believes himself to be. Um, and I don't say all this stuff like excited, but I do think that there are things that we could do. And by we can't do anything. We just gotta ride. We're stuck. We're at the bottom. We're gonna have to ride whatever wave that these people are gonna decide to do. But I do believe that if you are a politician and you do care about these things, um, we have to start calling out nonsense. We down on this side, like on the ground, have to start just calling out things that are absolutely ridiculous. Like something that comes to mind as an example. Um, so there's a little bit of a bubbling over the past few days over the wider array of screenings of that one documentary, No Other Land.
Mm.
So down in Miami, I think it's Miami. I want to say it's Miami. It's somewhere in Florida. But basically, like what we saw, what tends to happen in films is when something wins, whatever it is, it tends to get some type of buzz for a wider circulation of wider release. So No Other Land won an Academy Award. Yippee! Because it won Best Documentary Feature Film. And because of the subject matter, Gaza, nobody saw it. So um the film was it's good. I saw it the other day. It's intense, but it's a very good film. Um and now one of the mayors in one of these backwards ass Florida counties is moving to terminate the lease of the theater that premiered that film. And it's like, hold on, I thought we had rights in this country. I thought like if we wanted to film like if we wanted to watch something and somebody wants to like showcase it to the public, I thought it's okay to do that. Um but apparently like fuck them. Um
Jeez.
and that's kind of the stuff when like I'm talking about like appealing to cross ideological things. AMC ran and continues to run so much right wing propaganda in their theaters. So much. But there's never an outcry of liberals and Democrats broadly, or even lefty people, of saying that like we ought to terminate the contracts of these movie companies to air these films. It's just like, hey, don't see it, and that's about it. So it's pretty incredible to see that an independent theater that doesn't have the same type of protections as an AMC gets to be an easy target. Where I know for a fact, if No Other Land was premiering at AMC, which it will eventually, um, like make no mistake, there's going to be like a limited theatrical run that's mainstream because that's just the money, baby. But at the same time, like it's something that people want to see. So it's going to happen eventually, but for a fact that they're not going to target, um, they're not going to like start threatening, "Oh, we're going to get rid of the AMC's contract of X, Y, and Z."
Yeah.
Because I really, again, like, it's not going to happen. Like, so I think that's really disgusting that, and again, it's one isolated incident, but these are the things I'm talking about where it's like, I think it's very easy to say, hey, it's kind of ridiculous that a local mayor, in the face of a movie he doesn't like, or whatever ideological argument you can make, that's irrelevant to me. What's relevant to me is that he's trying to like circumvent free speech and free expression. If people want to see that movie, they have the right to do so. And like it or not, you can do as many reviews as you want, but people still have the right to see this movie if they see fit. So why are we going after a local business for making that decision and paying to do that themselves? And I don't think you need to make some type of ideological slant for people to understand that that's wrong, you know?
I mean, freedom of speech is somewhat misunderstood at this point. Like, I don't understand how so many people view freedom of speech as freedom from consequences. But if people are
Sure.
willing to put their speech on the line and take those consequences, I'm perfectly fine for it. And if boycotts happen, if there's an outcry over whatever message being put out, I would like to see more people push this. But when there's actual squelching by the government itself of freedom of speech, that's when I start to get worried. Like when we're seeing press corps getting kicked out, when we're seeing just all out denial of rights at that point, I think that's an issue. Yeah.
Yeah. And you don't have to take these. I think something that it's not that prevalent, or maybe it's within my corners of the internet, because I don't engage with a lot of these like more um how do I say this? I don't engage anymore with these just like down bad and down sad streamers that are just trying to find any possible thing to latch on. um I don't know. There's just like so much. I have so many. I don't have nice things to say about streamers,
The
but
outrage
I do have.
engine.
Yeah, like, but I do think it's important to recognize that there are just so many things that you don't need. Like, it's okay to come to the conclusion that if BLM or whatever group for that matter can who that you believe to be left, whatever the case may be. So if you believe them to be able to express their protest and express their unrest, then right wing groups have that too. You don't have to agree with what they're doing. You don't have to agree with the reason why they're out there, but it's their right to go out there if they feel like there's something unjust. And what I think is challenging for people is when they take a concept where it's something like, say, I support the right of free expression. And then you go online, especially these online people, because they're crazy. Um, and they try to make you take positions and argue things that are so far removed from the reality of everyday people, where they're just kind of saying these things just to say them. Um, and they do it in the guise of, well, I'm just testing your consistency on your position. I get no pussy. I'm just testing the your dialectic on your thing. Like, it's just like, what the fuck is going on? Um and again, it's not as bad. Like in my spheres now, it's very, very tame. But like, I think there is something to say that you should ask some level of questions about what you care about, but challenge yourself with practical application. Where, like, for as an example, for me, like January, like we just allowed for people to get arrested on J6. We just allowed for that display of police expansion, and we were just like, they stormed the Capitol. It's because they they circumvented our democracy and they did all these negative things that we don't like. And then Trump was just like, pardon. And then it's like, sucks to suck. Like, there's no there, like I say that to say where it's like, hey,
Oh,
for what it's worth, like, that's a radical thing to do. You spend all this time, energy, and resources and government money to go after all these people, and then it just takes a president to go burn all that money we used and we're good to go. Like, I had reservations of how the police were expanded in such a way to round up a lot of these people. Some of which were charged, some of which were not. Like, they're trying to throw a lot of things at the wall. But at the end of the day, like, people were like, he's not going to pardon these people. I'm like, of course he fucking is. Like, let's, like, this is a radical man doing radical things. He's not going to look at it. And then it's like, oh, he might just do like just the non-violent ones. I don't think he cares. Like, there's no, um,
I've never heard this
um,
argument on this before.
yeah. I mean, I say that to say it's like my personal about these things is looking at things that you have reservations about. Like, I think it's not okay, or at the very least, you should be skeptical at the expansion of the state and manifestations of that expansion. And as much as you want to go after all these J6ers in the world, you have to let it go. Democrats have to let it go. The entire American people have to let it go. Like, this was a severe failure on the end of Congress, and they have to hold that L forever. But instead of people saying you're gonna have to hold this L, there's no way you can really cleanly go after these folks in a way of like seeing quote unquote justice. They just went on this spree of arresting people countrywide. Some of which who are people that we know, like suspect Sushi, got arrested. But guess what? That nigga pardoned. Like, there's no like so now we like you have a streamer, a former streamer at this point, who was not only a member of the Proud Boys, but also charged for crimes at the Capitol, but then pardoned by a sitting president. And it's like, okay, this whole display of state expansion meant nothing except for the fact that it's now incredibly difficult to navigate through Washington D.C. Like, that makes me upset as like a general navigator within the Northeast Tri-State. But personally, I don't agree with any opportunity the state has to flex their muscle and go after people for the sake of justice or whatever faux nonsense. Like, I think there's just some L's you have to take. And the farther I get from J6, the more I see that, oh, like, we can do these type of things. Like, would it have been cool if Joe Biden, and again, it would be mostly symbolic. I want to make that clear. But would it have been cool for Joe Biden to pardon BLM protesters? Wouldn't it have been cool for Joe Biden to pardon the black activists who are some of which who are still in jail and who are facing like political nonsense because of actions that were unfounded upon when during Trump's like whole Bible nonsense. Like, it's the system, like Donald Trump is showing that the system doesn't move in the way that people think it is. And I think it's an opportunity to take advantage of that. It's an opportunity to take advantage of that. Oh, he's a radical president. He's going to reveal radicalism, and let's use this as an opportunity to like get some things that we want because we know that like, hey, like there's actually a different way of playing this game.
And see, I'm looking at this from two different directions, and like I don't even know. I've never had to wrestle with these ideas. Oh, give me
Sure.
a slight moment, but it's mostly in the idea that people feel powerless against Trump because no matter what he's been put up against, like he's literally said on tape, "Hey, I could have declassified these documents. I didn't, cause fuck him," and he still
Mm,
gets to like nothing's going to be done about it. Same thing goes with the J6 stuff. Like, yeah, these people were in jail, but he can just pull up and all that goes away. But then looking at the juxtaposition, Joe Biden pardoned the January 6th committee, pardoned his son, pardon Fauci, like pardon people in government, did not like there was no connection between Joe Biden and any of the activists that you speak about. So
Hmm.
I don't see where he would have done so, but it would have been great symbolically. Like honestly, I was
Right.
thinking like, yeah, he's gonna just get rid of all the student loan debt and be like deuces. There was no power move that really happened. Like there was a little bit of
Right.
money that was let go of, but like the fact that you get to see Trump basically just fend for his interest and be like, yeah, I'm gonna do this because what are you gonna do about it?
Right.
What do you do about that air of powerlessness?
Um, I just think hmm, despair is an important part of fascism. And what I mean is one of the features that makes people vulnerable to a Donald Trump in the first place are those fears not being addressed. Um, like it could be something as simple as like, oh man, there's just so many. I rolled that through like about 5 examples in my head in real time. Like people people are hurting. People are hurting. People are frustrated. And Republicans for 8 years, if not longer, were saying like our conditions are deteriorating. Our conditions are deteriorating. Our conditions are deteriorating. And Democrats, broadly speaking, and liberals in America just ignored them. They were just like, shut up. Like, shut the fuck up. And they said shut the fuck up in a bunch of different ways. And I like I think back to when that deplorable statement that Hillary Clinton made and how that was such like a charged moment for the GOP and Democrats. And in reality, like she was knocking she knocked at something and got what I think was incredibly important and we didn't take seriously at the time is that people are tired of being talked at like they're inferior to them, like the person that's talking to them is like is inherently superior. The way that they say and do things is like that's just the way that things are. And Democrats have a really bad track record of talking like that, and Republicans don't. They don't really. Well, hold on. There's a clarification I have to say about Donald Trump at this particular moment, but they got this support, among other things, of saying that, like, I understand your conditions and at least I'm going to try to do something. Like, that's why I mentioned in one of the discords that I'm a part of about the effectiveness of Ron DeSantis, where it doesn't matter that it doesn't matter that Republicans and the claims that they made in Florida were just kind of nonsense. DeSantis recognized it and went after those things that these people were talking about. Like, oh my gosh, there's trans ideology. I'm going to go against trans ideology. And what does he do? He does it. He does it within his trifecta. Um, Now, is there substance to that? That's going to remain to be seen. But at the very least, he's doing these things in such a way that guarantee people will at least support him, and people are really desperate for their needs to be met. Um, they're so desperate that they're willing to just vote for Donald Trump. Like they're in such despair and hopelessness that Donald Trump is their answer, and they're just like uncritically supportive of him. And I worry that the Democrats are marching their way to that same level of hopelessness. And when I'm saying hopelessness of whatever solution is presented to them, if it's charismatic enough, it'll just breeze through without criticism or pushback. Um, because I think that's how we got Obama. We got Obama from despair. We didn't get Obama because he was a substantively good person to have the job. We got him because Democrats hand selected him to be the guy. And and his campaign was literally on hope of like hope for a better future. Up, 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 up. And then reality is like, oh, this man's a menace. And instead of being like, hey, remember the hope guy? He kind of sucks. And and then going like, hey, shouldn't we like maybe we could position somebody to go against the hope guy? And nope, just 8 years of hope. And then the despair switched to the Republican Party. And then the face of the despair from a Obama landscape of being ignored for 8 years. You get Donald Trump. And then it's like, okay, now the hopelessness and despair is kicked back to Democrats again. So like I'm not quite excited about that idea of like hopelessness, but I think in the face of that hopelessness, to answer your question, or I guess to engage with that, is to help, or at least try to help alleviate people's conditions. Where I think Democrats have to take alleviating people's conditions seriously. Like actually going, okay, why are these people hurting? They're very upset because of Donald Trump. The Donald Trump is just a proxy for their suffering. He is not the actual cause of the suffering. And for some people, that might be like, what the fuck? Donald Trump is causing all these things, and these things are hurting people, which is true. But I promise you, a lot of people don't have federal jobs and are not and
Hey,
and
look
are
what I can
just
do.
Oh,
chilling.
we got
CRT, for you.
Joe's implying that
Oh.
Obama is to Republicans what Trump is to us. Like they felt this level of dread during those 8 years. Some of them might have.
I think it's definitely the possibility, right? Like, think about where Obama was. He was in a quote unquote untested junior senator who kind of was just brought into this because he was a good speaker. And obviously, if you're trying to present yourself in a particular way, Obama's a gift for that, right? Like, I think there's a lot of parallels of the despair from the Obama administration. Obama, say Obama, I mean like the post-Bush, he's out, we're tired of this man, and the same with Obama, like the same with Donald Trump, where we're done, we're tired of this man. He didn't really help us. He bailed out the banks. He fucking
Bruh.
he expanded the drone infrastructure within the military industrial complex with the goal, which made so many people so much money. He fumbled, like, there were so many fumbles that were enough to radicalize you, and then it just takes a charismatic speaker that understands what's going on with you is not okay, and that we're going to bring it back, whatever that means, or take control of the situation. And that was Obama and that was Trump. But the only difference between the two is that, like, Donald Trump is clearly the more radical president, the more radical force, where Democrats used Obama as a means of solidifying, I hate using like political jargon, but like solidifying neoliberalism. Like the presentation that the Democrat Party is the one of polish, of demeanor, of like, if they go low, we go high. We don't stoop down to their level because we are the superior conversator. We are the superior orator. And these people are just a bunch of crazy gorillas, who are just chimping out every time over trans people and gay rights. But we know these things are great, are good things for the people. And they did that for 16 years. Like the Democrats have been doing this like since at least 2008 of some level of posturing that we are the overlord, we are the ones that are actually the superior individual, and these Republicans and all these other people who aren't that are crazy. It could be the communists are crazy, the antagonistic left, as they call it now. And like there's an interview with Jamal Bowman that Breonna Joy Gray did, and he does the same type of cope of like, if it wasn't for these pesky antagonistic leftists, and it's like, oh, hold on, like these are your fucking constituents, you dumbass. Like these are people who all you have to do is do some level of alleviating their conditions. It's just like it just feels like to me that Democrats got how do I say this in a way how do I say this of being nice? It feels like Democrats were right on gay marriage, and then have just been victory lapping ever since. Of like, we were right about the gays, and just fucking waving their pride flags and shit, chomping around, like fucking making joints as a Supreme Court decision on that. Gay marriage is the law of the land. And then meanwhile, it's like Republicans victory lap on everything because they think their base is stupid because they're all disengaged. Like, all you need to do with the Republican base every once in a while is go, hey, you good? Great. Okay. Anyway, like there's no, they're just kind of letting their constituents go out to dry. But the frustrating part about it for me is that, Democrats are falling into the same vulnerabilities that got them Obama. And if that's what you want, if you want another hope candidate that has nothing to bring, because let's be clear, that was Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris was the gatekeeper of despair, and that's kind of what she was. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it. That's how essentially her campaign was positioned on. Like, you don't have to have anything to stand on. Donald Trump is that evil. Like, this moment is this great that she ought to not get debates, not take interviews. Well, but actually, she took interviews on this, and this day. I watched those interviews. I'm sure you did, at least a couple of them. I mean, I too enjoy glazing from my friends and colleagues. Like, and then like it went from like she's not getting interviews, that she's not getting hard interviews. Then she gets the one hard interview until like, oh, this lady is a psycho. Like am I supposed to forget? Like, are we supposed to forget all of those op-eds and shit about how like Kamala Harris is a very like toxic work environment as a senator? Kamala Harris is a very toxic work environment as VP. And then we're supposed to think that she's going to just like clean up her act as presidential candidate. Because I know for a fact her crash out post-election was crazy. I know that being in that room was probably the most unfun experience you could ever have.
I need an
baby,
SNL
that
skit
shit
of
sucked.
that. I want an SNL skit of Kamala on election night.
Yeah. I want the whole thing. I want the entire. I'm ready for the Hulu documentary. I'm ready for the whole I don't know what you call it, but basically I need the day of, I need the whole day, the whole Sunday, front to back. I don't need the debate. I don't need the debate. The debate's whatever. We knew it was trash. You know, everybody was crashing out. But I do need the cabin meeting, because you can't tell me that shit wasn't wild. Like, there's no one that's like, oh, it's just, a quiet Joe Biden quietly came to the conclusion that he ought to step aside. You know, this motherfucker was 2 feet down. Like, I ain't leaving for shit. Like,
2 feet,
and
10
then like,
toes.
Yeah, 2 feet 10 toes. It probably got so bad that like Nancy Pelosi left the room crying. Like it had to have been South. And then meanwhile, like you got fucking Kamala Harris probably chilling. Her Sunday was probably so peaceful of like, up, I'm the VP. I'm doing VP things. Hanging out. She meant she was like with her sister or whatever at the time. I don't know. But like, and again, you like, what do? Like you get a phone call from your boss and your boss tells you you're dropping out and and by the way, I'm picking you to replace me. And you can't really make a decision because the tweet's already out. But yeah, no, that documentary is gonna be crazy. Crazy. And listen, like I don't, as much as I like the idea of a documentary of democratic fuckery, the Green Party's no better. Like the Green Party's no better. Let's just keep it 100. Like the Green Party's no better. The Libertarian Party's no better. The Communist Party is no better. They probably had, especially Jill Stein, because she's a cunt. So you know that shit was crazy. You know that like when it comes to people who I didn't want to be in the room for their crash outs, it's Jill Stein. But like the goal for their campaign was a little different. I think she's understanding slowly but surely that like, hey, and again, like, make no mistake, fuck Cornel West. He like, goddamn, like it's amazing.
I forgot about Cornel. Holy shit!
Yeah, he ran as the Green Party. He was getting positioned as the Green Party nominee, and Jill Stein was responsible for that transition. But he didn't want to debate. And Jill Stein and all the Green Party members is, you have to debate. And he's like, I don't want to debate. I'm out. And he left. And like, that's the thing. Like that's a part of it that really makes me mad. That the only reason why we don't have or had Jill Stein on that ticket is because of Cornel West. And no, like there's no like, wow, man, Cornel West is kind of grimy because like you party switched multiple times, and now like you party switched multiple times, and now you're positioned to be on a Green Party ticket, an actual legitimate political ticket, and you bounce because you don't want to debate people or you have some internal party conflicts. Where it's like, where are you gonna go? You have nowhere to go. You like, it could have been such an amazing moment for not only the Green Party in terms of its legitimacy, but the legitimacy of third parties in general. There's so many different. You could do like vote swapping, so much shit. But nope, Jill Stein again. And then like people want to kind of drag her, I would argue unjustly. That's kind of why I think like, as much as I don't like Jill Stein, I think that in this particular moment, like this political moment of like the past 4 years was unjust. Like she was put into a similar situation that Harris was put into. The only difference is that she actually went through internal debate. So she still went through the process of the Green Party has to pick somebody to maintain ballot access. And she's open about that. Like she's open that like the only reason why you have me is because Cornel West dipped. And if you want to figure that out, talk to him.
I forgot he existed from that moment up until right now. I literally forgot that even happened.
Listen, it's people are going to do crazy revisionist history over this election in the Green Party, and I'm not having it. Like, there's no, like, I can't believe we got Jill Stein, this professional loser. Hey, blame Cornel West. Go talk to him. Be like, hey, why did you leave halfway through the process of you being prepared as the candidate, and then you left us with Jill Stein, you asshole? Like, there's no, And then they'll hit you with the I always describe myself as a jazz man type shit. Piece of shit asshole. Like, I'm really mad at him. Like when it comes to
I'm mad at him
when it
now.
comes to yeah. And then I don't know if you saw this, and I hate reminiscing about this electoral shit, but these were the stories that I was adjacent to, which were funny as fuck. Basically on the 0 hour, Cornel West and Claudia de la Cruz, who is the member, I forget what I think the Socialist Party, agreed to do vote swapping with Cornel West. And this is
I'll be right back. I got to grab something out of the freezer before it explodes.
oh yeah, I got you.
But please continue. I'm still listening.
But basically, they announced that they were going to do a vote swapping campaign for basically the places that Cornel West has ballot access, but Claudia de la Cruz is not. She's hoping that the de la Cruz voters vote for West, and then where West doesn't have access, the de la Cruz voters would vote for West. I don't know if I said that correctly, but basically swapping their votes in places where one party has access and the other does not. But it's just damn. We could have had this with the Green Party and disenfranchised Democrats of a mass vote swapping campaign for Cornel West. But he decided to be a bitch. So,
I mean, would you want to debate with the kind of dirt he was going through? Like, basically, they were just calling him like a deadbeat dad, didn't pay child support, all kind of nonsense. Like, being a black man on that ticket with that kind of heat coming at you at a debate.
Yeah,
that'd be all it was.
Right, yeah. And not for nothing, again, there's still something to say about, or something we ought to explore about just general mismanagement of these campaigns. Sorry. But in reality, it's going to take some time for there to be for third parties to improve, but it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. I straight up lost my train of thought. Wild text message. I totally forgot I had to pick up my girlfriend from work.
Yeah, I figured it was getting about that time to raid out, because nobody seems to have any answers beyond what you're putting forward here, and you're giving us a pretty good history of how things worked out.
Yeah, and look, I'll say this kind of as a soft close. I want there to be, if people are feeling hopeless, I think that it's just recognizing that you are vulnerable. If you are completely hopeless within the Trump administration, within the Trump administration, you think there's nowhere to go, just recognize that your vulnerability as somebody who's feeling hopeless is going to be eventually used against you. And you have to be vigilant. And ready. Vigilant and ready.
That's
I'm saying vigilant and ready. Yeah, vigilant and ready for parties to try to manipulate you into doing things that are against your interest. And even in the face of your despair, saying that hey, I don't care that Donald Trump's in office. You or whoever is running as a successor, you still have to present something that alleviates my conditions. And if you don't, then I don't know what to tell you. You can't let despair be the reason why you vote for a Democrat again, especially one that doesn't line up with your interests. And don't let them try to trick you into thinking that a way that they're presenting themselves are actually your interests. What do you actually care about? Why are you in despair? What are you in despair about? And don't let them use Trump as a proxy for your despair. You're feeling despair because of Donald Trump, but Donald Trump is just a placeholder for that. It's just the thing that you are generally projecting to. and just really figuring out what that is.
One
Is that
last
therapy?
question.
I don't know.
One last question. I don't want to hold you because I
Yeah.
know you have things to do. So when you're in a mindset that, hey, we want Medicare expansion, like we want Medicare for all, we want, school to be more affordable, we want price controls or at least an alleviation from price gouging from corporations. And we know for a fact we're not going to get it from Republicans. Like they're doing the exact opposite. But at the same time, you're looking at an economy in chaos and the whole deal, knowing full well it's not going to happen within these 4 years. And they're going to find the money within the DOJ to continue to fight proxy wars all over the planet. Because that money, whether or not we were in Ukraine, whether or not we're in Israel, that money ain't coming to us. What do we do?
I'm at the position where we have to gradually, how do I say this in a way that makes sense? None of this is sustainable. So like capitalism, like the current empire that America is positioning itself to be is not a sustainable venture. It's going to lead to a lot of people suffering, a lot of people dying, countries being destabilized, all types of things that you can describe. But in the face of that, I think it's important to not fall for the trap of the caregiver, because I think that there's two problems that present themselves for people who still rely on electoralism to think that electoralism solves your problems, which it doesn't. If it did, then tell it to all the Iraqis or Palestinians or Sudanese. There's so many countries that we fucked. But anyway, there's so many countries. But basically, like, you have to recognize that you have one party that is the chaos party, which is the Republican Party. They're going to rely on chaos as a means of justifying their actions. And then when things are super chaotic, they're going to present themselves as, we can solve the problem, even though we create it for ourselves. So like we're seeing that with Donald Trump, looking to consolidate the government in his own image, which is causing all types of confusion and disarray in all these departments. You see an entity in Doge that's not quite clear in what they are trying to do. Like they say one thing, but then in reality, like they haven't really articulated like how this reduction is creating efficiency. There's so many, like you see that, like, sure, they're looking to end the war, like the war in Gaza through ceasefire agreement, the war in Ukraine through ceasefire agreement. But what does that mean for the destruction in these regions? What does that mean in terms of empire expansion? So they're just the chaos party. But on the other end of this, you have the oh my goodness. Okay. All right, cool. So you have the caretakers, which are the Democrats. They recognize that, hey, like both parties recognize that this system is not sustainable. They just won't say it outright. The only difference is that Republicans are willing to extract all resources before the planet just explodes at our expense. Where Republicans are like, this is not sustainable, but let's try our best to maintain a level of, we'll say consistency, but that's not the best word. But basically, we'll try to like prevent the faucet from completely just gushing through and flooding the house. So we'll support like these incremental efforts. We'll support these, and again, these incremental efforts only have the purpose of preventing the complete like destruction of the faucet. So it's not going to solve anything. Like they're not looking to alleviate anything. It's just like, we're going to try to stop the bleeding for now, but we're not going to do anything to try to heal the wound. So they rely on corporations, um, in particular, to help like curtail that decay. Um, again, it's not a sustainable thing. They know that, but at the very least, they'll make money long term down the road through these investments that they have with these corporations, through these public-private partnerships that they have. Where Republicans, they just want to accelerate the thing and make as much money as possible. So, if you're a voter or somebody who is looking to vote, um, you're left with this like weird dilemma of this party wants to at least let me see my 80s, and this party doesn't give a shit when I die. Um, and for a lot of people, that like again, like I'm not gonna tell who people should vote for and what they ought to do exactly in terms of electoralism, but just recognize that that's the duality that you're living under, and that like one's a caretaker and one is the accelerant. And I think it's very tempting to fall for caretaking over and over and over, but at the very least, we need to push society to a different system altogether and not have to settle for caretaker and accelerant all the time. Because there's going to be a point in terms of the caretaker where they can't caretake. There's going to be a situation where a levy or some type of failsafe is not going to work. And then they're going to start taking and doing very risky things. And they're going to do risky things to try to stop the bleeding. And because they're caretakers, they won't know how to deal with that. So they won't have an answer for the student loan, all the student loans just defaulting at the same time and fucking up the market. Like they're like, because again, we're going to see a student loan crisis. Like we're already in a student loan crisis, but that shit's going to pop eventually. No different than we had a housing crisis. That's the next thing. And do we want caretakers for that or accelerants? Or do we want to try to every day and every political action move to a different system altogether? And I think that that's what needs to be required. That's what needs to be required. And that's going to need thinking beyond 4 years. It's going to need thinking 10, 20, 30 years down the line of like, I might not even see like this. I might not. You will not see. Yeah, like you're not going to see the socialist utopia that you're aiming to go towards. I'm not even saying we want to go to a socialist utopia. I do believe that we need to push gradually towards socialism. So I think that's one of the only answers currently available that's going to stop us from fucking the planet. But recognizing that you're not going to see that, right? Like it's no different than people who are in support of, not to be like completely hyperbolic here, but like slave abolition. Like abolitionists weren't thinking about like mixed race kids in a non-coercive environment or like full on integrated people. They didn't think they would see that. But I think they would say, okay, we need to do certain things to push towards that thing. Because it's not for us, it's for people beyond us. I think it's what we have to start aiming towards. And it's not going to be a it's not going to be a social democracy. It's going to be socialism, period. And we can't keep thinking that capitalism is just this thing that we caretake, and we can't keep thinking that capitalism is this thing that we can accelerate. We just have to recognize that it's not a sustainable way of structuring the world. And that doesn't mean that there's going to be some socialist utopia tomorrow. It doesn't mean anything. Like there's going to be no socialist revolution for as long as we're going to be alive. But what can happen and what should happen, I believe, is gradual actions, behavior, and culture that pushes towards that pushes towards socialism. Instead of just thinking that, oh, if we just, maybe we just change the punctuation of capitalism will be okay, or change the definition of capitalism will be okay. It's just not going to work. But by pushing towards that, it means that it doesn't mean that you completely do away with like what's currently presenting itself now. It just means that every action you do politically, socially, culturally needs to push towards that. And then not letting the like despair and agitators get to you. Where it's like Donald Trump's fascism was an inevitable thing. It wasn't something that was avoidable. And just coming to terms with that. The next 12 to 16 years is going to be incredibly difficult for a lot of people. But it doesn't mean you just go off the path and just be a crypto bro and cash out. Like there's no, like, it's going to require like intense discipline. Is that discipline that Americans right now have? I'm not exactly sure. But yeah, but all we can do is try. All we can do is try. But I do think people's desire of immediacy is dangerous. Not only for themselves but for others. So like in the face of an accelerant and a caretaker, don't just default in thinking the caretaker is a good thing, but also don't default thinking that the accelerant is a good thing either, because both of those things are products of despair. A product of despair, like think about it this way, like either way this is going to die. Either way this is going to die. And being a caretaker is selfish. Being an accelerant is selfish, but they're just selfish in different ways. But yeah.
Well, solid message of hope, Joe.
I'm sorry, like I'm very doomer on this. But I think the silver lining is that you're trying to push towards that thing. Like every day is like a gradual, like another day of trying to push towards that in ways substantively, instead of thinking it as like, oh, I need socialism tomorrow. And if I don't get socialism tomorrow, it's not good enough. Like if I don't get, and because I don't get socialism tomorrow, I'm just going to go to the caretaker. I'm going to vote for the successor of Joe Biden. I'm going to vote for the successor of Kamala Harris because I need my immediate needs met now. And it's like, no, you don't. you actually don't. Nothing good has ever come from immediacy. So you got to work towards the things that you care about. And this is no different.
I appreciate that, and thank you for coming on tonight. It has been
Yeah.
great hearing your perspectives. Like you brought a lot of things to my mind that I hadn't thought about, and some things that I thought about and forgot about, and came back like,
Sure.
Cornel West, fuck that dude.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's justifiable upsetness at Cornel West is a good thing. I'll say that.
So I'm gonna go ahead and raid out for the night. Appreciate all of you. Chad is the true winner as usual. And we will catch you next time.
Yeah.
Been a
Yeah, no,
blast.
and I'll catch you soon, friend. I have to go straight to picking up my girlfriend, but I'll catch you soon, all right, friend?
Yeah, for sure. Take it easy.
Yeah, I'll catch you. Take it easy, man.
Peace.